So easy question. So when all of these links are in blue like this means that it's working for the GitHub guy?
I don't know. I would imagine. Go to Bootstrap, get access by connecting your GitHub account on Bootstrap Studio. So first to get.
Well, the only thing that I've done,
Your GitHub
I click on the site.
So
Right, that's the link
All
to
right,
get to the page,
I think we are live.
and it's
which I got to through the email. But I also got
trying to see what your page looks like.
Yeah.
It's always different from access. And where are you clicking on the blue links?
I haven't really clicked on anything,
Oh,
but
oh,
I could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
so I
I-
would just go there, I guess. And authorize.
Yeah, I'm getting to the same place.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's it.
great, okay. Just wondering.
All right. So I think we are ready to get started. So the first thing is the Zoom thing. They sort of did something fairly sketchy and allowed anyone to basically start. You click a link that a bad actor hands you, and then it starts a video chat immediately, and there's no way to like. Yeah. So I think they're mitigated. They've sort of changed it probably already, but the way that you would sort of prevent that from being like turn on your camera right away is what I've already done. I joined a chat room, and that's because there are settings somewhere. Where's this? Yeah, so there's somewhere there's settings. There's a checkbox that says turn off my video when joining meeting. If you check that, then at least it won't automatically turn on your webcam, because that's super scary. Anyway, I would recommend everyone do that just in case. Maybe we should all delete Zoom. But
let's go back to using Skype.
Yeah, I mean, we've already used so many different things and so much churn with all this stuff that I think it's probably we'll just deal with it and not change everything again. All right. So today is day 2 of DevOps Day. We're doing more stuff about running servers, running databases. This is going to be how you'll run the APIs and the databases that serve the data for all of your capstones. A web browser JavaScript client or a mobile app, if you make a mobile app, they're going to connect to these servers, and they have to be just running 24 hours a day up in the cloud somewhere. And in order to do that, you sort of rent time. The normal way to do this is rent time on a server that someone else manages. You don't normally anymore have a computer box in your house that you manage yourself, because it ends up being more time and effort than just paying a small monthly fee to rent a space on someone's server. It's a volume thing in general. You could easily find that you just want to run something that's very low maintenance and you want to run it from your house, and that's valid. And I think Alice mentioned that yesterday. That's something everybody I think would be really happy to hack on, because that's super fun. That's like you're actually doing something real rather. This is sort of much more common these days in the industry. It's something that, it's probably good to be familiar with. So that's why we're doing some of that this week. And it's, if your project has, enough momentum where it's like spending 10, 20 $20 a month is not that much big of a deal, then it's absolutely worth it. So Okay. So the first thing I want to cover is the goals for today. I got some feedback that like it would be good if we sort of get what do we want to do by the end of the day, just so that everyone kind of has a grounding and in what to expect. Today, we're going to try to get a full-on Node.js Express application running on our cloud server as it kind of would in the real world. So like in a way where it runs all the time, in a way that you can connect to it from any computer. You don't have to be shelled in or logged in to have it run. It just runs itself. We're going to try to connect that cloud server to another database. So we're going to actually rent a database to go along with our server. And this should be something that's also on the AWS free tier. If you're using DigitalOcean, there is a similar managed database that they have. And the cheapest one they have of that is $15 a month for DigitalOcean, but there should be the credits on the GitHub. I hope that would be covered by the student pack. So I'm not totally sure about that, but it should be possible to do either one for free. We're going to, once we're ready to do this, we're going to learn how to copy the code from our chat room example app, which we developed, up to the server, get it running on the and start it up, and then actually be able to interact with the full chat room app and the full database online. If we have time, we'll add something called a reverse proxy, which runs separately from Express. And proxy just means something in between. So there's already like a lot of stuff in between. And tomorrow, what I want to do is actually sketch out a map of some of this stuff, because I think a visual map is going to help once we have so many. If you want to get into that. But reverse proxy is something that runs, next to your Express application, and it goes in between that and the load balancer, whatever's on the other side of that. And all it does is just proxy requests. It handles common things with HTTP requests. So, sometimes, so like securely decrypting. If somebody has an encrypted connection to your server, it will do the decryption and the encryption sometimes. It will process the headers that the client is requesting compression on the data, which will make your server much more efficient. Some kind of proxy is really good at handling compression. None of this is stuff that you're going to need for your capstone. And I don't know if we'll have time to get to that last stuff. We might want to put a load balancer or DNS in front of our server. But again, it's not necessarily something we'll have time to today. We'll see how it goes. Really, what we're trying to do today is get the full chat room example with the full database running on our Amazon accounts or DigitalOcean accounts. And that will be pretty good. Okay, so the thing I want to do is do some bash exercises. Shells, bash shell. We're going to go through the stuff we did yesterday, and we're going to try some new stuff just because I think it's, one of the big skills that are that's a big challenge in this area is being comfortable jumping onto a server. Because once you go onto a server, normally you don't have like a finder and you don't have a mouse. You really just have a terminal. So you have to be somewhat comfortable in that environment to not be sort of get stuck at every turn. So let's review what we did yesterday. We made a directory in our home directory called .ssh. And really the second half is all you need to run today if you're going to do this again. because this first half will probably error because you've already made the directory. And then this and says run the second half. So this is sort of a slightly different than what we did. We typed one and then typed the other. And if the first one errors, it's fine. You can still type the second one. In this case, it'll actually just quit instead of running the second one. So you really only need the second one once you have the directory. And actually, to avoid tripping people up, I think what we'll do is just write this out like this as two separate commands.
No, it's shared. He's got to click the thing underneath it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Jakir. Is that the right link?
That's the right link.
Okay. Well, I can't post here if you can't join. Thank you. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So sorry. Yes, very good. Okay. So if we did mkdir tilde/.ssh, that one's erroring because I've already made it. If we do cd tilde/.ssh, we're in that folder. Now we moved the downloaded file out of the downloads folder into this .ssh. And this is whatever you called the downloaded file. This is our secret key file we downloaded from Amazon. If you watch the DigitalOcean, I did like a very short little tutorial on how to do the same thing on DigitalOcean. You actually have to generate both the public and private key to get it working on DigitalOcean, because they don't say download it, they say paste it. They want you to generate it and then upload it. But in either case, you're going to end up with a private key and possibly a public key. If you have the private key, you can actually regenerate the public key anytime you want. But in any case, the keys that you're going to use to log into your server should always end up in this directory. And then the last thing you have to do before you can use the key is change the permissions on the key. And we do this with a command called chmod. And 400 means the owner has read access and nobody else has any access. So there's three numbers. The first number is the owner. The second number is the group that the owner is in. So it could be admins or and then the third number is everybody else on the computer. And 4 means read. So you add together the numbers 4, 2, and 1 for read, write, and execute. So 4 is read only. 5 would be 4 plus 1 or read and execute. 7 would be 4, 2, and 1 altogether. This is very restricted permissions, but it's what it expects you to have before it will be okay with you using this as your private SSH key.
What should you get back when you put that in?
Nothing. And if you want to verify that it works, you can go to, whoops, let me just remember I'm going to just close this because I always go to the regular terminal, not the VS Code terminal. Okay, so if you do ls-l, what is it? CIC Amazon key or whatever the name of the file is. It'll print out the full statistics for that file and see there's just the one R here. If I did chmod 777, that's giving it all permissions. And if I do the ls-l again, we see we have read, write, execute for the admin, for the owner, read, write, execute for the group, and read, write, execute for everybody else. So that's like fully open permissions. Anybody can do anything to this file. So we definitely don't want that. Normally it's you have the owner has write permissions and other people might have read permissions. So you'd see a 755 or a 644 sometimes, but we're gonna do chmod 400. again, because that's fairly important to make sure it's very secret and you don't want anyone but. Okay, so once you've done that, there is the last command is actually connecting to your server with SSH, and that program is called SSH. The -I stands for identity. So this is like how you're going to prove who you are and that you're allowed to log into this server. This could either be a username and password in some cases, or we're using our private key file. So you give it the path to that. And if you want it to work from any folder, make it the full path to that. So it should start with the ~/.ssh/ whatever the file is. And then you log in to your server with the username. In Amazon, conventionally, you're going to log in with Ubuntu at whatever you copy from the console, so the IP address or the host name. If it's DigitalOcean, this is actually root. And typically it's sort of like it's a faux pas or something to log in as root to your servers all the time. So, if you're doing this for the long term or in like a real sensitive environment, you'd want to create a new user that's not root and use that to log in instead. I'm not sure if we should go through that exercise. Maybe tomorrow. Okay. So that's all of this is basically getting your key from Amazon and preparing to log into your server. Once you finish this last command, your shell should change to green. Or in DigitalOcean, it's just root at something, it's gray, it's not green. But on an EC2 with Ubuntu, it'll turn green, there it'll say Ubuntu something, and then you can run commands on your actual server. Everything you type in that green shell in Amazon's data center. So if I do, let's go back to where the folder we're in, just because it shouldn't matter what folder we're in. And I'm going to type clear, which will clear the whole screen. So if you ever want to get rid of all the junk on the screen, just type clear. And I'm going to do SSH-I ~.ssh/CIC Amazon key.
What does the /I do?
-I is an argument. So this whole thing is an argument you're passing to the SSH program. So you're basically telling the SSH program, I have a setting. If you do man SSH, remember the man command is for manual. Yeah, this will basically print out all the --everythings. So if you see -I here, it's an identity file. So this is, you do -I, and then after the -I is the path to the file that has your private key, which is, it's referring to it as an identity file. And then that's the only actual argument we need in this case, but we need the destination at the very end. See, which is not wrapped in square brackets. So that means it's not optional. Everything in a square bracket is like, sometimes you might use it and sometimes you might not. But this means you pretty much always need this one piece, which is where you're going to log into. That's obviously very important.
So the identity file is telling you where you're going to log into once you put that argument?
No, the identity file is basically saying, here is the private key, which I'm going to use to log in to prove that I'm allowed to log in. You're proving to the server that you're allowed to log in. The server already has the corresponding public key because we set it up to have that matching public key.
Okay, and so when we type this in, we're giving us a key so that we can connect.
Sort of. It's so yeah. There's a thing called a key exchange that happens. It's very sophisticated math where basically each side can prove to the other that they have the corresponding half of the key, but neither side sends their half to the other. They're just related mathematically, and this side is used to sign something to say, here's, my part of the key, and then it's combined with something the other side sends, and then it's all combined together into the same thing. It ends up being the same thing on both ends, but neither end knows what the other started with. And then the same thing, just because that's a long random string that's the same on both ends, can be used as a password basically to encrypt and decrypt and go on from there. So there's a handshake. There's when you
Oh, okay, so we have to.
What happened after you typed it in, like what was returned to?
SSH. Which command? The SSH command.
The SS, the one with the slash,
Dash I. So
or did it just go to another line?
So if you go from there, you should be able to.
so I didn't finish it yet.
Oh, you
And
didn't finish.
and when
Okay.
you finish the command and when you run it, it doesn't actually exit and return anything. It stays run. It just starts running and it stays running, and the terminal turns green because it's now
Oh, because now
forwarding.
we have
It's
access.
forwarding everything you type now to the server that's on the internet
Okay, then. So
and-
this is literally just, you're just typing this to make the
to
connection.
make the connection. Yeah, and the I proves it proves to the server. It can do what's called the handshake to basically prove that you have the correct key,
Okay.
and then it opens a secure tunnel so that to manipulate or inspect. It's all secure. That's why the first S is secure shell. So once you run that opens the connection, and when the terminal's green, everything you run is securely tunneled basically across the internet and then run by a corresponding program on the server over here. And then it prints the output that's sent back across the internet, and it's printed out by your half of the program here. So there's really two halves. There's the SSH client, which we're running with SSH here, and there's the SSH server, which is running on your web server on Amazon. And that program I think is called SSHD because it's Linux. They like putting D at the end of things that are run in the background. They're called daemons, I suppose.
So we set the permissions, we made the connection, and now we.
Yes, we're about to open the connection and then run code on our server. So that argument is just the permission, the file which proves that I have this access to the server. And then the server itself, I'm going to say the user I want to be on the server to log in as, and that's Ubuntu when we have Amazon.
I'm sorry, it's kind of hard for me to hear.
Yeah, there's a lovely HVAC whining from the ceiling too.
That TV is on a wheelie cart. Might be able to move back in the other room.
Okay, maybe we'll have to take a break and move the class. Okay, and it's okay. You know, if you need me to repeat anything, I mean, this is yeah, this is probably maybe worse than the concert outside.
I didn't even notice it until Alice said it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yes, another noise.
You know, why don't we just try to move into the room, because then people are going to start arriving, and this is complicated enough, you know, in a quiet room. All right, we'll be right back. I'm gonna pause. Well, we'll just keep streaming. What's up? Hey. Yeah, we're gonna. Well, is it gonna be louder than there?
No,
Okay. Is there a big duct work in here or something? All right.
Yay. That's what I'm talking about.
That's why I wanted to come in.
Uh-huh.
Let's grab us over here.
There's a TV going. Yes.
Whiteboard here too.
And they had it.
Okay, let's get back to the TV.
I mean, I just noticed there, like, you go to,
A little bit
yeah.
delayed.
But, my in-laws like it. But they have television monitors everywhere, so it's that powerful. It's not for us, even though I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
This is very small.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna sit on the.
Oh, it's right back in its little place, perfect.
The ground pin is disconnected. Let's see. It's gonna fry itself. Ah, okay. Yep, watch out. All right. Ah. Cozy. Yeah, cozy. Go get down here.
So let me try.
Well.
So where on the computer is SSH? Like, is it in desktops, desktop or download or?
It's in your home folder.
Okay.
So your desktop and downloads folder are both in your home folder.
So no matter where I am, I would go to CD SSH.
No, /SSH.
Well, yeah, but I mean. SSH.
Yes.
There is beer in the fridge. I heartily encourage anyone who likes beer to grab one.
That should be a,
There's also lemonade.
there should be a dark coding show like Drunkles.
Someone make sure I drink this too before I try to drive and do this.
This is what they have. They have like two different.
So did we do didn't we already move our keys into the download, just from download?
Yeah, so this
into
is
SSH? Okay.
largely a review of.
Okay, so we start really with the change bot, the CHMOD,
We already ran that as well. You
Yes,
only
right.
should have to run that once.
the I one.
And it should stay. The key should just stay on your computer indefinitely.
So all of this
um,
is just review.
If you get a new laptop, you're going to have to copy it over or regenerate a new
I will
key.
never get a new laptop.
I had to do software updates on my computer, and I don't just set the IP instance.
Mhm.
So I had to-
Guys, this isn't. What did I do wrong? Guys, I redid the whole thing because I know that I did everything up to like now and adding the express sample code.
Okay.
And then I told no to run index.js.
Yeah.
And it says it's listening on the port, and then the IP address of the port.
Okay.
Because I created a whole new server.
Yes, Node or Node.js. Or it was
I'll
Node.js
bring it
or
to you.
Node.js.
Okay.
Okay.
I feel like I missed this step though, or it's just being not.
Yeah, maybe the security group has not opened
So-
the port to the,
Looks like
Oh,
they were different
that's
for
what I
people.
missed.
It's all the
Yeah,
same
you're
version
right.
in the end.
Wait, so,
Oh,
right,
right.
so it did.
It doesn't.
so,
Okay.
you can jump to the security group from that right there.
Yes. And
Get rid of my
then
terminal.
we have to go
I'm just gonna remove the,
outbound or inbound?
this would be inbound, yeah. So someone from the internet connecting.
Add rule. Port 3000.
Okay, so I'm at the AWS console. Remember this is, you go to this by clicking services and then EC2, or you can type EC2.
It worked, got it,
Awesome.
thank you.
That was
So I had
it.
to do, yeah,
Cool.
so I just did that, correct?
Great, great.
Sweet. Okay, did it.
Okay, so if you do services and then go to EC2, you should see the one running instance once you're logged in to Amazon.
Where's the services?
You have to sign in here. Yeah, if you're signed out, there's a big orange button in the top right, which says sign in. And then you should pretty much from everywhere then see this services menu here. And once you click on the running instance, you should see this list here. We only have the one running instance, but what I'm gonna do here is copy. You can copy either one of these. I think this one is a little more stable because this one might change. I'm not sure if they'll change the public IP sometimes.
Yeah.
This one should stay stable as long as the instance stays running.
Yep. Oh, it's the same thing with the public IP. Usually it only changes.
Oh,
if you
okay.
close your instance.
Okay. But, okay, well, anyway, I guess you can do either one. But this is, you can click here to copy. And then in your terminal, this is what goes at the very end of the command. So it's SSH-I, your key, the path to your key file with the tilde and everything. And then Ubuntu at, paste the thing from Amazon. And if you've already set it up, you've already answered yes once and that you trust the server, it should go right to the green prompt. And it will tell you, you are user Ubuntu at this host name, which is pretty much matches what it tells you the host name is. So now we have ls, we have our test folder from yesterday. We do cd test, we have that. If we do ls again, we can see there's our index file. We can do node index and our server's running. So at this point, you should be able to leave this running. Oh, that took a little while to start up. But we should be able to paste the same thing we used to log in. We should be able to paste into our browser and do :3000 and see the hello world that our server is returning. So that is just kind of a recap. This is what we ran to get all that working. So if you need this, they're in the slides. And if you have any trouble with either of these steps, if you're trying to set it up again, just let me know. But we ran sudo apt update, which apt is a way to install software on our server. And this updates the registry or the repository that utility uses to find the software to install. And then once we've done that, we can install Node.js with no dot, I guess, and npm. Maybe they're the same, but we install both things by just listing them with space between them. And you can install as many things as you want like this. Then we make a test directory. We already did this, so it already exists. And we're gonna npm install and express, just like we do npm install on any computer. Now that we have Node.js and npm, we can do all of the Node things that we could do on our local machine. And then finally, we have a little editor we can run on the server that's nano. And if we go back to, let's do Control C to close this. And if we do nano index.js, we'll see the contents that we pasted. And this works just like pretty much any editor. The one thing about it is you can't use the mouse. So you can't like click up here and move your cursor. You have to sort of navigate around with the arrow keys. I don't know if there's really any other shortcuts in Nano. Nano's pretty straightforward. But all of the things you can do are listed at the bottom. So you can actually search for something by doing Control W, where is, and say console maybe, and it will jump to where it finds the word console. And then if you want to save, you do Control O. It will ask you where to write, and you hit enter and it writes. If you want to exit, you do Control X. And if you haven't made any changes, it'll just exit immediately. But if you've made like a change and you do Control X, it will say save modified buffer because you've changed something. And I'm going to say no because I just typoed a bunch of stuff. So if you just exit and say save modified buffer, that is a way to save and close. Now VI is the other editor that's pretty much installed everywhere. This one is if you really want to get into this and you really want to get some powerful tools that you can use from the command line for editing, you can start learning VI. It's tricky because when you start up, you can't type.
What the freak?
Yeah.
Nope, I don't like that.
So if you panic, if you did this, you probably shouldn't have because it's hard to quit. So you need to do full colon, shift colon, Q, exclamation, which is like, just quit, don't save anything,
Just go
get
away.
me out of here. Yeah.
If you don't get the colon to show down there, first hit escape.
Oh yeah. So the panic mode for VI is, thank you, it's basically, oh no, I've done a whole bunch of horrible things. Escape, 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 colon, Q, exclamation. Oh no, I typed it into my yeah. It's learning, it's getting smarter. All right, escape, 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 colon, Q, exclamation. So that's like, get out of there. The only other thing I'll say about Vim is if you want to start trying it, it becomes much less scary when you understand that escape brings you back to like default mode. And from default mode, the U key is undo. So you can always just kind of go back. If I say, oh no, you can do escape and then U, and then that's how you go back. So you don't necessarily have to always panic and quit whenever you make a mistake. Okay, so that's all we'll talk about with the editors.
Is Nano installed by default on Mac OS?
Maybe.
You didn't install it, unless it comes with those.
Let's see.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is.
I didn't know that. Cool.
So Mac OS. So there's some things, these Unix programs, where in Mac it's a little different than Linux, and it's very annoying when you find out that you've been trying to type the command for like half hour and you're like, what am I doing wrong? And it turns out that there's a little difference between Mac and Linux, and you were doing the Linux way, but you're on your Mac, So that's, I don't know what to say about that. That's just some pain everyone has to go through, I guess. Anyway, that's all we did yesterday. We got the server running and we were able to connect to it. Let's go through a little bit of some just learning about some more command line tools that some of them we're going to use today in order to copy files, in order to do things that we need to administer our server. So here's some advanced command line tools. These are maybe intermediate command line tools, but some of them are more advanced than others. There's a couple we're not going to mention because they're like if you're really into this, you'll learn about them eventually. Like awk, we're not going to do awk. Yeah.
It's its own programming
It's
language.
it's a crazy like half programming
Yeah.
language, half shells thing, and
Is it R?
it's I don't know, what does it stand for?
No.
It's,
Is it awkward?
It is awkward,
It is
yes.
awkward.
here, let's find out what
See
it
the
stands for.
Pardon me,
Gawk.
explain.
So it doesn't even call it awk, it calls it gawk, pattern scanning and processing language. Oh boy.
Oh, it's their names. Under third line,
Adam, Wolf, and what?
Where?
third line down next to
Oh.
programming language. Oh, Kernigan and Weinberger.
Al Kernigan and Weinberger.
Usual
Wow.
suspect.
Yeah,
Sounds like a law firm.
yeah.
Even more awkward.
All right. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that one today, but that's a crazy one. Okay, so here's a couple. The first one is called grep, or GNU, regular expression and print. What does that mean? That's for searching. It's for searching for text, for searching for patterns of text. This is a very useful utility if you have a whole bunch of data on your server, a whole bunch of text files, really anywhere. It might be worth sort of tinkering with it on Mac OS, because it's extremely straightforward way to search through lots of files for something that you're looking for. And it could be all kinds of, you can match a literal word or a phrase. You can match just like a line that starts like this and ends like this. You can match all kinds of different combinations and patterns if you learn regular expressions. And that's why it's called, the RE in there means regular expression. And then it's like, so run a regular expression on some text and print it. It's basically searching.
Quick question, what does that tilde mean like here? Am I back fine?
Yeah, that means you're in your home folder. So you're not in the .ssh folder. You're not on your cloud server either, because it's not green.
Yeah, no, I'm
Is it?
not.
Okay, do you want to log
Do
into
we need
that?
to?
I mean, I would recommend for,
Okay.
is everybody on their cloud server? Cloud server? Dana?
No, because I had to restart. And
Okay.
I had to get a new instance, so I'm just trying.
Okay,
I'm at the CH mod and it just keeps telling me.
So go through that whole string of commands again, or how do you just get?
I think so. You don't go through the whole stuff. Let's see, if you go to,
So I just opened up a new editor, so what do I do to?
so, remember that long command you typed in yesterday, it was like SSH-I.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So copy that part there. We gotta make a few changes to it.
you don't need to be on.
Right.
Okay. That works. I think it doesn't complain, it works. You can do ls-l with a space dash.
Oh, I hit control C again. Okay, no, nice.
And that will let you verify basically
Okay.
that that key is read on just the one. So that's the right permissions.
All right, and so the next thing. I need to change the
No, that's the stuff you just did. So these are describing stuff.
permission. Oh, okay, use your Amazon key file. Okay.
Also
So
have to
you
change
need to go
that.
to your Amazon console
What's the IP that we want? What do we?
and copy the server.
So that's gonna be the one that's on your AWS account.
EC2 here. Just go. And go to one.
So it's a 10.10.10 with that. Hit control C
And
again.
then see when you highlight
It's
this,
still trying to do
details
something.
appear in the bottom.
When I highlight,
This row, it's already.
oh, it's already highlighted.
Either of these top two, if you hover over them, you'll see a little.
There you go. Nice. Hello.
That is like a link to top.
Good. How are you?
You click that. No, there's two lines.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
All right.
And then that goes at the end.
Yeah.
of the extra.
So go to running instances there. I'll show you the.
So it would be SSH.
So we need your
IPv4 IP or the public one?
So it goes at the end of this.
It's on the right side. It's scroll.
And then utilities also.
Well, no, it's still the slash.
Yeah. So, see, need a terminal open.
Another slash. And then you, no, it's, you can do that at the end.
Okay, so we got it.
All you need here is the file.
Yeah, but maybe you have it in there still.
So it's dot as, it is dot as.
Nope, don't have it. Okay.
And then slash. And
It's farther back.
Dana,
Okay. So if you go to open up the slides.
that's all you do there. And then you move on to tabs. Now you can.
Okay, find the S2.
And that should log you in. Yeah.
Oh, I think those would be,
This one,
these are yes, we
Yeah.
it should log you in.
Okay, it's that one on bottom. Yes.
Copy?
Yep.
That's already copied.
Yeah, we'll have to, we need the whole command, so we'll have to paste that,
Ubuntu.
again.
It's an N, it's not like
I don't think so, not unless you install something. It isn't effective.
I don't know why I have so much trouble spelling that word.
What does it mean? It's like Swahili or something. It means, I forget what it means. Ubuntu.
I
Yeah.
don't know, I used to, I'm pretty sure my hard drive was.
Hmm.
No.
Installed it on my hard drive.
Not since high school.
That was fun.
Okay.
Okay, so S.
I had a window.
Got it.
No, just the page, so the command. Paste that stuff in.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we gotta change two things here, we gotta change that file name there, so it matches the one that's in your.
It means humanity.
Humanity. Cool.
Yeah.
Right here.
You might have to,
I'm trying to call something that.
All right. So, I'm gonna do CD tilde. You probably don't have to do this if you just logged in, but I was in the test folder here. This gets you back to your home folder. If you see the tilde at the end, that means you're in your home folder, just the tilde.
And the dollar sign?
Dollar sign is just a convention to say, this is the prompt, this is the end of the prompt, and you type what you want after it, so.
then hit tab a bunch of times.
Okay. So if we want to do grep
There you go.
There it is.
It's in there.
Dash
Okay, so now we gotta go back and hit your RT.
anything. This is going to just sit there and basically wait for input, and we've given it no input. So it only runs on something
Nope, at the end. So-
that you type into. So I'm gonna do Control C.
Nope, just get rid of that.
And
So
the
that's
way
just
you want to
like
use
placeholder.
this
Yeah.
is, let's say, echo.
Yeah.
Let's try the command echo. Echo basically just prints back out whatever you give echo as the second thing, it sends it back out. It makes sense, it's echo. So we say echo Friday,
Oh, it's
and it's,
Hit yes. That just shows up whenever you
goes
get
Friday.
the computer for the first time.
What's the purpose of that?
it's sort of good for chaining together logic where like you want
Oh, okay.
to,
So remember the
um,
CH one?
basically as the
So we gotta do
start
that on
of,
that file.
as the start of a command, just like we're gonna show here. You're basically
So that's
telling the
like
computer
Modifies the
to-
permissions.
generate some kind of output for whatever reason. And it's usually what you want to do with that output is send it along to something else.
Grammar, whatever it is.
How's that going?
Okay, we just gotta change the permissions on the file, we should be good to go.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay.
So hit up, space.
It's, yeah,
Uh,
sometimes you want to generate some output. And in this case, we'll generate the output.
Space.
And we'll use this pipe character, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But this is how you send the output from something as the input to something else. So we're going to use this to say grep-e Monday. And it sends back nothing because it could not find the string Monday in our output, which is Friday. If we say day, it'll print the line where it found Friday, or the line where it found day, and it will highlight the letters in that line.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's very good for searching. If we say, let's go to CD test. Does everyone have the test directory?
Wait a minute.
So did kind of that.
Yes, I'm already in.
Okay.
I was trying to, you typed in node index.js and I went on type that.
Does it print anything back?
Fine.
Could not find module. Okay. LS. Yeah, you don't have the index.
So did he put the dollar sign in after test? No, that's in the prompt now.
And go to the internet.
So he has
and
CD
search for
test.
Express Hello World.
And then he got test, and then there's a dollar sign to our test in the test folder,
Yes.
and it's just waiting for the prompt. Okay.
Right.
And
Right there?
Yep, that's. And then just the whole contents of that, just copy that. And then go back to your terminal and do a Command V. And then do Control X, not Command X. And save modified buffer, say yes. File name to write, that's good, hit enter.
Okay, so we just created that inside of the editor.
Right.
Okay.
And then pasted from the, so now if you run node index.js, it should run. Not at the node, yeah. What if print something different? Pull up a little bit here. You can drag the middle bar here way up, but we're not gonna do much outside the terminal. Cannot find module express. Okay, so try npm install express. And once that installs, if you run it again, it should work this time. Okay, that warning's okay. We didn't set up a node project, so it's not running.
Yay.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're in our test folder, and here's something we can do here. We can say cat index.js. And this prints out the entire contents of that file. If it's a very big file, we could say head index.js. It does exactly the same thing in this case, but if it's a big file, this is going to default to printing out 10 lines, just so you can sort of get a little preview at the top of the file of what's inside the file. So these are for looking into files. But now, here's something we could do really easily. We could say, I want to do cat index.js, and then pipe character that to grep -e, and we'll look for console. We want to see wherever we're logging stuff to the console. And it will find the line in the file where we use the word console, and it'll highlight it. So this is, good for searching any input, anything you can get on the other side of that pipe and input it to the grep. It'll let you search it. You can also, how do you grep in a whole directory?
-r.
Grep-r. But that doesn't need an input like a pipe input, right?
No. So that'd be like -r and then usually pipe that to something so you can see it better.
Okay, so we can do cd .. grep -r, the whole test folder. So /test -e console. And we'll search, well, oh, we searched the whole node modules folder and found every single use of console. And we did it very fast too, which is very cool about grep. It's very, very efficient at searching.
I think there's also a command to open up every single one of those in the editor.
Oh,
What did you put
What's
it
not-
after the R, after dash R?
-r, so do /test.
Did that one?
Or T and then tab.
Yeah.
And, oh,
What? Well,
well, so you grepped every line in the whole directory. So you need to do the -e at the very end. Here, I'll put a, I'll
Oh, I
paste
see.
this
Okay.
into,
Me, for me, a drink.
so that should print a whole bunch of the word console in every file in node modules. Anyway, so that's grep.
Guys, I have a question. So since I had to, redo my instance, should I go ahead and do the sudo apt update and the sudo apt?
Well,
Should I be-
you must have already done that because we were able to install Express. So if you didn't have those, you wouldn't be able to install Express.
Okay, so I'm already passed.
I think you're all set. I think you have everything.
Alright, and so now you guys, I'm just grabbing set and yes for me.
Yep. Okay, so sed is the next one. This is a little editor. This will let you actually edit files. This is one of those tricky ones which works slightly differently in Mac and Linux. So I think this form will work in both, but if you want to not replace it with a backup, in a Mac you have to give it an empty string, and on Linux you don't. So
I think there's also not supposed to be space between the -i and that first
on Linux or Mac?
on Linux.
Yeah,
Is there,
okay.
is it on, I don't know how that works.
Let's try it out and see what happens. I'm just going to copy this right out of the, and we'll modify it, but okay. So that's grep. Grep is very cool. Here's sed-i, and this is the I is in place. It means edit the file in place where it is on the file system. And then the thing after it is like where to put the original file. So it's basically take a backup of the file while you're doing this. So we say the convention is to rename it to .bak, which is like, this is a backup of how it used to be. And then here is a sort of a sed expression. I don't know what you call this, but it's a double regular expression. The S is the command to run. This is substitute. And then there's three slashes, and in between the first two slashes is one regular expression, and in the between the second two is another regular expression, or whatever you call it. The thing you want to substitute in wherever you find that regular expression. So this file doesn't exist, but what we're going to do is say S will say hello, and we'll substitute goodbye. G at the very end means globally, means don't just find it once and then quit. It means do it for the entire file. So these are both regular expressions. They're not very fancy ones. They're just strings, but we're gonna look for the word hello, replace it with goodbye in the file ./test/index.js.
And it's okay to have the
So-
capital letters?
We want the capital letters because I believe it's case sensitive unless you put the I here, which makes it case insensitive, I think, yeah.
Pretty sure.
So that didn't seem to work. Let's try,
Oh, but you still did the quotes, I think.
geez. Let's try with no space. Okay, nice. That's unfriendly, but it works. So that's changing our index file. And now if we go to cat.test index, we can see that we have replaced the word hello with the word goodbye. So that's what sed can do. It can do a whole lot more fancy substitutions and things like that. But it's just a very, if you get good at this and it's like, oh, we need to go through this file and everywhere where it says, 50, we need to change it to 75. Like, if you didn't know how to do this, you would be going copy, delete, paste, whatever, 50 times when you could be saying program using the shell, replace them all right away. And it's very useful because of that. It's useful in general. I know this is DevOps kind of like, it's for, because on the server, you really have no other utilities. But sometimes this is even quicker. If you just are used to having a terminal and you use it for things, it's quicker than opening an editor and using whatever shortcuts they have for find and replace.
Yeah.
It can be.
Especially if you're on like this server on AWS that doesn't have an editor. You
Of course,
can drop
yeah.
into that you can like VS Code has certain all files in your project, but your server doesn't have VS Code.
Yeah, it could. Now
It
you could
could.
put a Windows system and a server, but then you have to stream all the pixels from your screen across the internet. The thing about a terminal is all you're sending across the internet is the actual letters that go in the terminal. And it's a very small amount of data that's very efficient. If you want to do any kind of, clicking or having a window or having a VS Code like this, you need to basically send every pixel for every frame. There's ways to compress it, but it's a very different ballgame, and it's hard to set up. It's not, unless you have, there's like server images on Amazon where you can pretty much immediately VNC into them, right?
Yeah, they have their hosted desktop service.
Okay. So yeah, you can absolutely get VS Code or whatever on a remote server, but it's not as common. Like, you don't need it in many cases. When you just need something to run on the internet, this is much, much simpler. And if you're comfortable in this world of the console and terminal, then it really can make you productive. Okay. So the last one on this page, and then we have one more page of these, is called PS, or process status. If we do PS, we see two processes. One of them is bash, and one of them is PS. We're not really running very much on our server. This is processes, though, that the logged in user, Ubuntu, actually has started. So we've started the terminal itself, or the shell itself, which is bash. And it's printing PS because at the time we run PS is running, right? So it's one of the processes.
Which slide are you on?
I got this.
The same slide as grep, sed, and PS.
And you said
I had
one
all
is
set
bash and
off
what's the
to
other one?
Oh,
AUX.
yes,
So that's right.
that's from the example.
Right.
So AUX prints out a whole lot more. If you put PS space AUX, you're going to get a ton of processes. And this is really everything that's running on the server. So this is like a whole bunch of internal, like Linux stuff. The brackets mean something scary, internal. Zen bus, Reaper. This thing is going to basically reclaim memory that out of memory process left basically abandoned, I believe. There's all kinds of stuff that runs on Linux. Crypto, great. That doesn't mean Bitcoin, that means like cryptography. So, and then all this stuff, and the naming conventions are all over the place. None of this makes, some people know about all of this. You're probably more familiar with the internals of Linux than me, but there's a whole lot that goes on in Linux. And if you check your processes on your Mac, you'll see the same or more number, probably a lot more processes if you really list all of them out, because a full computer runs a whole lot of different things all at the same time.
So when you say, so Linux is different from OS, so when I'm doing this, I don't understand the difference, or when I would use one.
What do you mean by this?
Well, when you said before, like taking out the space in .bak,
Yeah,
that was an OS thing?
Kind of. So that was a version of the SED program. Mac
Right.
OS has its own version of SED that's different than Linux's SED.
So when would I be using Linux and not OS on a Mac?
so Mac OS, you have to be specific to call it OS X or Mac OS, I think it's officially called now.
Yeah.
Because OS just stands for operating system.
Right, okay.
Technically, Linux is a kind of operating system or a family. Linux is really more a family of operating systems because it has a kernel which does very, very just fundamental things about an operating system, do processes, manage memory and give memory to processes. Very, very basic things, interact with system level hardware and stuff like that. And then everything else on top of that is what Ubuntu comes in. So Ubuntu says, here's a whole bunch of packages and programs. One of them we're going to talk about is called systemd. That's a very sort of low level, but that's not technically in Linux kernel. That's like something added and running on top of Linux. And basically everything in here is, or almost everything. Are there kernel modules listed here?
I don't think so. You could run ls mod, you'd see it all.
Okay. So these are things running on top of Linux, basically, but as part of Ubuntu.
Okay.
And then if you do just PS, these are the things that I'm running logged in to my server, the things that I started, which are bash, the shell, and PS, which I just ran.
So if I'm on my Mac and when do I have to think about whether I need to be aware of the Linux versus Mac OS? That's the question.
Generally, you'll notice it'll be specifically when you're running like a VM on your Mac. Most of the time, if you're not doing that, I mean, you'll know if you're running a VM because you started it.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you're developing stuff like this in Docker or in something that sort of emulates Linux, then it should almost always be Linux, you know. And I think we're sort of teaching the standard Linux way examples of this rather than the Mac ways. You could install Ubuntu on your Mac if you really want to get crazy with it, but that's a big step to take, and I don't know if I'd recommend it unless you're really gung-ho about it.
Nope.
If you
Just
want-
don't want to.
If you want Linux on
Just
a
don't want to be
computer,
freaking out because I can't figure out what the mistake is, and it's a space between, like, you know.
yeah, it's the thing is, I don't think that is really going to come up in the immediate future.
Gotcha.
It's something to be aware of, that it's a possible pit. I'm just saying, this is a possible pitfall you may encounter in the future. What's up?
I have loud.
Especially too, something like SED, once you spend 2 hours troubleshooting why your SED command isn't working, you'll never forget.
I was kind of trying to avoid that whole part of it, but I guess.
Nope, there's no avoiding
Okay.
it. You just have to go through.
I mean, you could
All right.
internalize our pain.
Yeah.
Yourself, and then hopefully that might.
It's like
take you off
life.
in the
It's
future.
like life.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I'm just really just trying to be full disclosure here. So in a couple of years, when you waste half of a day because of the difference between Mac and Linux, you don't go, nobody ever told me about that this would be a thing.
Right, and
Just-
then
I
you'll come
just
by
told
and
you.
say,
Yeah.
I did tell you.
Yes,
about that.
yes,
Then I won't be
exactly.
tempted to smack you.
Yep. So anyway, that's you know, it's more rare, and the differences are not,
Okay.
you know, enormous or in every program, but you know, if you are enough of a power user to use things like SED, you're going to run into that, you know, and that's part of becoming a power user of things like SED. Okay, so if let's do just an experiment here. If we say node /test/index, so we're going to run our little example server, and then we do space and a ampersand character, and this tells the shell to say start this process, but run it in the background and go back to the shell. So don't just wait for the server and print the server. It won't print anything. It'll just say 122016. Oh, and it actually does connect it to standard out. So we see that come out, but we're really back at the terminal. You keep hitting enter, you can keep typing things. And this is really running in the background. It might pollute your prompt with like messages if it gets messages. We'll see, yeah, that's actually, let's try that out. Reload this a couple times. Maybe we'll get some debug messages. No, I guess there's no debug messages. Anyway, so we're running Node now, but it's in the background and we still have our terminal. If we do PS now, we can see there's Node in this list because it's running. And why is this useful? It's because basically you can take this number here and say, okay, this is process number whatever, and I've lost control of it. It's just doing whatever. You can close this. Can you stop this? No, but you can kill it though. Okay, stop, you can Docker stop, but you can't just stop. But you can kill this. You can kill all the node by name like that. So that will terminate everything that starts with node. Why does it say terminated? Oh, it's because it's still in the history of processes. Yeah. So that's sort of how you can start managing processes, and you can run things in the background. You can run many things all from the terminal. And that's what processes look like from this command line. Okay. All right. And it stands for process status. Okay, so there's a couple more, and these ones we're going to use today. We're already using SSH, Secure Shell. You've seen this. You log into a remote server using an encrypted network tunnel. You need to provide it. Normally, you can do it with a password, but that's generally considered a bad practice because you have to type the password every time you log in. It's good to not, have to remember the password, type it correctly, and be videotapable going like this at the keys that are the password. I mean, if you're on a security, it's very real that you could leak your password by just happening to be on a security camera while you type it. So one of the nice things about these files is, once you set them up and you're using them, they're pretty much unstealable as long as you don't, type them out or show them on the screen or stuff like that.
Accidentally commit to your Git repo.
Don't commit them to your Git repository. That's actually very good to sort of reinforce. This should not, the PEM file that you downloaded should not go on your repository because then it's on GitHub. And, your GitHub might be private. You can make a repository private, but that's not generally also there's a taboo against that for good reason. But that's SSH. We've done that to log into our server already. SCP is very much like SSH, but instead of just going to the server and running its default shell, like logging in interactively, we're going to use the same kind of encrypted tunnel. This really should say tunnel. We're going to use the same kind of encrypted tunnel just to copy some files over to the server or from the server. So you can copy across that same tunnel, and this is how you'd move files to your remote server without having to copy and paste them or whatever one at a time. And then finally, rather than having to copy every single file individually, because we might have node modules, we might have all kinds of bundled up things. Docker is one way to do this, to sort of containerize. One of the things it does is package up your files. But if we're just doing this in the plain sort of server administrator way, we'd want to make an archive of these. So that's what the first command is for. tar stands for manipulate or tape archive. So this is, as you can tell, it's a very old command from the days when you would archive your files and you would store them on an actual plastic tape with magnetic bits and things like that. And tar is a utility that was invented for writing those tape archives and loading those tape archives.
Do you
And
mean the discs? The old discs?
not a floppy
No.
disk. I mean like an actual, like a cassette tape,
Oh.
like a reel to reel. But there's data on the strip of tape.
Oh, like on those old mainframe like
Yeah,
shows?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So
okay.
that's how most storage, like with large amounts of data, used to be all on actual tapes.
So used in a lot of places.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, it's durable, right?
Yeah.
Tapes last a long time. And they're cheap, right? They're very cheap.
Did you say people still use that?
Yeah. Usually it's not for like fast backup, but you need to like archive a ton of data and you want it to last for a long time. You have big racks of tapes.
Wow.
That's the kind of thing they store like in the vaults or mountains or.
Yeah,
whatever.
kind of.
Yeah.
Usually you want it's for offsite backup, disaster recovery in case your business burns to the ground and you have no data left.
That would suck.
Yep.
Yes, it would. Anyway, most of the time when you're using this utility, you're not using it for working with tapes, but that's why it's called tar. And this generally, when you put all together a bunch of files into one thing that you can manipulate as an archive, that's called a tar ball. And so there's sort of like that kind of caught on as the name, a tar ball. And then the .gz at the end that we're going to use with these files is because the Z means when you compress it, it's going to actually not just put all the files together in one big file. It's going to then run that file through a compression algorithm, which is like a zip file or like WinRAR or like any of those kind of compressed archives. And it's the algorithm is called gzip, so that's why there is a gz at the end.
I'm pretty sure it stands for GNU zip.
GNU zip, okay. There's also bz, which is BSD zip, maybe.
That sounds right.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's a zip file. It's a compressed whatever, but the common extension is a double extension .tar.gz. And then these are ways we can compress and uncompress files. So that they can be easily worked with. And in this case, what we're going to do is use this utility to zip up the entire folder that has our chat room files in it, everything, even the node modules, why not? And then we're going to be able to send that with secure copy over to our server. And then on the secure copy side, because Mac and Linux both have this utility, and in this case, they work pretty much identically, at least for what we're doing, you can uncompress it with the same program in the Linux and you'll get your files back. So this is what we're gonna do in a little bit to move our one of our chat room apps, or if you want to move one of your local repositories, once you have a server running locally and you say, I want to deploy it, a manual way of deploying it is gonna be exactly this. Zip it up, copy it over a secure shell or a secure tunnel, and then unzip it. Okay, we'll do one more topic, and then I think let's do a little bit of, let's do the copying part, and then let's talk about running it with systemd. Maybe break before or after the copying part. Maybe let's try to get it copied and then break. This last thing, we already sort of looked at this. Pipes are extremely important in Unix or Linux. And Linux. Linux is a version of Unix. I guess I should have gone through some of the history, or somebody should have. Yeah, Unix was first. Unix, I believe, was developed by AT&T. Earlier, 70s, I think. So, yeah.
At early 80s and 70s.
Yeah. So all kinds of stuff has a origin in Unix. Mac OS is a kind of Unix. BSD is a kind of Unix. Linux is a kind of Unix, of course. And Linux basically was, the LI stands for Linus. So basically, Unix was extremely expensive. It was like, this is something that only giant companies can afford. They buy a room-sized computer. They buy Unix to run on it. This is the professional computer system, operating system. And basically, people would like, steal that maybe, or play fast and loose with the license. And it was like, they'd get in trouble for that. And somebody, Linus Torvalds, was like, well, technically it hasn't been tested in court or anything, whether you can just do exactly what Unix does. So all those programs like, cat and PS and all these things, just build my own version of them, rebuild all of them. And then, bundle that together with, and then I'm bungling this story because there's Stallman and there's GNU and there's all this history and drama.
And wait till they hit somebody who says it's GNU/Linux.
Yeah, so a lot of people will say it's not Linux, it's GNU/Linux, because not calling it GNU is leaving out all of the actual programs, the PS, the cat, and everything that made up Unix, and just saying, well, it's the kernel, Linux, that's the whole thing. It's really not, So it's very complicated, and people get very pedantic about it. And anyway, in general, Unix was the sort of product version, the commercial version. Linux was sort of and GNU Linux, sorry. It's like we're gonna rebuild all of
I'm
the.
not one of those people. You don't have to do that.
If any of them are watching the stream, I'm sorry. It was basically saying we're going to rebuild all of the things this does. We're going to make our own versions of them, technically by not copying the source code, but by reprogramming them with maybe some differences. It technically somehow wasn't illegal. I think it absolutely would be illegal these days because of the Oracle versus Microsoft or some of the other precedents since then. I think it absolutely would be illegal to just say we're going to copy everything it does with our own source code. But it's totally was not challenged at the time and has grown to be pretty enormous, and it's used all over the world. It's used by all kinds of companies for servers, and it's used for laptops. It's used all over the place,
So it's basically like they just copied it but paraphrased it.
Sort of, and then
Okay.
improved on stuff in a lot of ways. A lot of the actual improvements have come out of the Linux, the GNU Linux, and then the BSD communities, which were sort of based on, what does BSD stand for?
Berkeley Standard Distribution.
Okay,
It's like Unix.
it's a version of Unix that was from, but then there's Open BSD.
Yeah, that's like it's like how Ubuntu is a Linux distribution, Open BSD and FreeBSD are BSD distributions,
Okay,
which is also a distribution of Unix, but yeah, it's just stuff on top of the base kernel.
but BSD is a free distribution of Unix.
Yes.
And so Linux is a free kind of like clone of Unix.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's very complicated. Anyway.
There's a lot of history if you ever get extremely bored in a weekend. It'll take you more weekends than that.
And none of this,
None of it sounds interesting.
none of this, well,
It does.
It doesn't?
it's interesting academically.
Okay.
It's not going to help you with your
No,
capstone.
no, absolutely
It's
not.
not going to help you at all. It might help you if you're like, joking around with some interviewer for a job and they're like, oh yeah, GNU Linux. You can be like, haha, I know about
BSD.
BSD Linux. Yeah.
Yes.
But beyond that, I don't think there's any reason for us to be talking about it
Okay.
right now. So we will move on. So the pipe character is from Unix. It's from Linux. It's what we use to basically pass the output. So there's two sort of outputs. There's two kind of like standard, what are called pipelines that every Unix program interacts with. One is called standard in, and one is called standard out. And when you type something or pipe something as into the program, if you run the program and then you type things from your terminal, that's a way that sends it from standard in. And if you pipe stuff, it's also sending from standard in. And what it prints out back to the terminal is what's going through standard out. So those are, hey, well, we're nerding out about Unix and Linux and history of GNU.
And you missed it.
Yeah.
You missed
Yeah.
it.
I missed a lot, huh?
Anyway, the pipe sends stuff from one program into another. It's a very fundamental kind of like pattern, which is, a lot of these programs are not very useful by themselves because you'd have to send them the right input or do something with the output. But once you start chaining them together, they get very useful. And we just saw that with searching files, searching a file, or in this case, you can search for a process. So if you say, oh, I don't like all of the stuff that PS Aws is sending me, if you just type it, it's gonna dump a whole lot of stuff to the screen. But let's say, oh, all I care about is what system D is running. So you could say PS AUX pipe grep -e system D. And this will only print the lines that have the word system D in them, and it'll highlight where it says system D.
Yeah.
So the pipe, it's a very, very powerful way to manipulate stuff and do really useful things with the shell. There's also these other pipeline characters. I think all 4 of these are real, and they stream data in or out of files rather than just connecting one program to another. This, instead of having to say pipe it into a program, I think it's called T, which is like writes it to a file. You can just say greater than sign, which sort of looks like an arrow. It's like send it to this file. And you give it the name of a file, and it'll write the output to the file. So we could say PS Aws pipe grep -e system D greater than sign, which means start a brand new file and overwrite it if it already exists. If you do the double, it'll write it to the end of the file and leave alone anything that's already in the file. But we do greater than, we say log dot, I don't know, txt maybe. And we run it and it prints nothing because we redirected the output of that last command somewhere other than standard out. We've redirected that to an actual file. And if we do cat log.txt now, we'll see what we just grepped. We don't see the highlighting because it didn't save that. But it saved all of the text that was the output of the grep command. Okay.
Grep or grep?
Grep. It stands for GNU regular expression and print. So you run it, you give it a pattern or a string to search for, and it searches for that in whatever the input is, a file or whatever, and it prints out all of the matches it finds. So it's basically the search utility that's built into the command line. Okay, so the last thing let's do is use some of these utilities to copy one of our chat room apps to the server. So let me make sure I have the latest version of the chat room app. I hope it still works, and we're going to copy it up to the server. So which one do you think? I'm thinking maybe we should copy the one that uses the Sequelize or Mongo. I don't think we want to have to run all the manual database commands in our new database. So maybe let's just do the Sequelize one, which is chatroom ORM. And I'm going to do pull to make sure I have the latest. I don't know what changes there would be. But chatroom ORM, I have no changes in. It has all this stuff. It has the server, and it has the endpoints to get or post messages and get or post users. It has the migrations and everything, right? We did all that migration stuff. So what I might actually do is not run the migrations at all and just uncomment this thing. So every time we run this, it'll wipe out our database for now. But to get it up and running, I think that's okay. So I'm gonna set this back to force true and uncomment it. If you remember, this was what we used to reset our database every time we were developing, so we didn't have to write all that migration stuff. I'm gonna commit this. Don't need these. I'm gonna say code re-enable DB sync to be avoid using migrations for now in chat room URL. And it says too long a message, too bad. Pull and push. Okay. So I'm gonna say exit to quit out of my server. So I'm gonna log out. This will log you out of the the remote shell. And it says connection to this server that we connected to closed. So now we finally disconnected. That whole time we had a connection open to our Amazon server. And we've just closed it by running this, I guess, program called exit. Now, I'm in the sandbox folder here. I'm gonna say cd gus cost ls, and we have our chat room ORM folder here. So I'm gonna run the command that we just reviewed here, which is tar, and we're gonna use the first part for compressing it. So you say tar to make it smaller, zip it up basically. V means, I think, print verbose output, so print a bunch of messages, and F is file. So we're gonna compress a bunch of files, not just a bunch of data that we pipe in or anything. So this is the name of the archive, and then you can just give it the folder here. And then we'll do chat room ORM, not chat room app. So we do tar dash czvf, and then we'll say, I don't know, archive dot tar dot gz, and then / chat room dash ORM. And it prints out a lot of stuff because we have probably about 50,000 files in node modules. And we didn't bother to skip node modules. We're not going to reinstall. We could reinstall this, but it doesn't hurt to just bundle them all up. Why not? And we have all our migrations. We got all our code. Everything's there. So if we do ls, we now have a file called archive.tar.gz. It's just the zipped up version of this whole folder. We're going to do scp, and I'm going to forget all of this. So instead of trying to type it out, I'm going to go up, 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 till I found my last. Before we logged in, we ran this SSH command. So it should be the last command on your local shell. And I'm gonna go edit it because I do not want to try to get all of it right. And remember, this is my Amazon server. I'm gonna hold the Alt or Option key and go to the left, which will let me skip real quick. And instead of SSH, we're going to go backspace and run SCP. And whoops, what was that? The -I and the file that we use to prove our identity, those are the same. We still need to establish that secure connection. We still need the key to be able to do so. But rather than just saying, I want to log in as this user, we're going to say, first, what file we want to copy. So this is archive.tar.gz. And then we go all the way to the end. And this second part is where we want to copy it to. So this is where we actually put the server, the user at the server. But after that, at the very end, we're going to say colon, and we have to add the file where we want it to end up on the server. So we're going to copy something from local to a file on the server. And I'll just call it the same thing, archive.tar.gz. And because I haven't given it a folder or any place to put it, it's going to end up in the home directory You hit enter and it should print out something. Yeah, it gives you a little progress bar. And then it goes back to the console with no errors. So I think we've copied it successfully. It's 4 megabytes of random node files that are all gzipped up. So that's quite a lot of random files. Most of them are not part of our actual source code. Is everybody able to do that? I'll post this. You're gonna have to replace maybe the key file name if you named it something different, and maybe this part if your Amazon server, because your Amazon server is at a different place. And let's take a break, but we'll help everyone get this working. So that's the command to copy this file. And then if we go back up all the way to the SSH, I'll just show that we SSH back in, we do ls, and we actually have an archive file here. So we've now successfully moved the file over, and all we have to do now is say tar dash xvf. So this is x is extract. There's no z because we're not compressing. We don't need a compression algorithm. The v is verbose, the f is file. So we do, what's the order? Archive, and then dots. Do you have to give it the file, or does it?
No, it'll unzip into whatever directory you're in. Yep.
Cool. So it's unzipped, and now we have our chat room ORM folder with all its files on the server. That's kind of a lot, but this is, if you're doing this kind of thing for deployments, you can make a script that'll do a lot of this. You'll get used to it, and really, we're not going to need to do this every single time. This is just sort of showing the actual raw way to get something locally onto a cloud server and get it running. And we're doing everything right from the shell. So yeah, let's go to break for a little bit. Get some sandwiches. They're free. And see, maybe 15 minutes. And in the meantime, if anybody wants help getting the file zipped up and onto their server, we'll help with that. Okay. Is there an? Why do I have a 1? Oh. Yep, I get the same thing.
Oh, you did? Cool.
Yep. You able to copy the files, Dina?
You're talking about the tire?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I I understand, because you're doing how much just.
yeah, you get it.
Yeah,
You got it.
well, this is, your live stream.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, I haven't actually done
live, you can always go back to live stream and
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
this is something that is an option to do for your capstones, and it's a lot of steps, but it might be in some ways it is kind of the simplest because it's just running a plain computer in the cloud.
Understand how we can zip the files and stuff and compress them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should be able to do all the basic steps to deploy. They're not that complicated.
Yeah.
But there's also ways to make them easier. Like remember how I made those shell scripts to run Docker so you didn't remember the long command the whole time? If you ever want to try and make one of those for this kind of stuff, I can walk you through that.
Oh, that's like
Yeah.
automation.
Yeah.
And that's part of one of the points of a continuous integration server. One of the things we can set up, maybe we'll do that on the office hours,
Yeah.
is set up a CI build. So if you go through this extra steps of programming your CI server with basically just a shell script, you just need to hand it something to say, hey, when I check new code into GitHub, and it's in the trunk branch or it's in like some kind of branch that's like the real branch for production. You should take that code, you should zip it up, tarball it up, send it across to the server, and you give it a special key that it can use to do all of this. Send it across to the server, log into the server, unzip it, and then restart, move it to where it needs to be and restart it. And it'll do all of those steps for you, and you don't have to actually do any of this when you update your code. In general, it takes a little while to set that up, but if you're using migrations and if you're sort of doing maintenance continuously on the server, it does pay off. So
When do you get to the point where you want to start compressing? It's something that you want to do along the way
Usually you only need to compress when you're ready to deploy it.
when you're ready to deploy it.
yeah. So usually you go through cycles of testing and experimentation on your local machine. And a lot of this stuff comes later when you want to actually say it's good to go. It's, sign off on it and ship it to the production, to the real world. So, yeah. At any time before that, it's probably a lot simpler to just run your server locally in your terminal yourself, and then connect to localhost and all of that. But, it still requires you to manage a database of some kind, and all of that. It's even that's not super simple, but yeah.
Yeah, so very, excuse me, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Those salt and vinegar chips.
Salt and vinegar. I'm gonna get some of those.
Yeah, they're good. I was trying to separate my tongue from the roof of my mouth and it just went. My girls do that sometimes when they talk to me, because they go, irritates me. I always like, and.
you know, all the things my daughter does.
Really? Because I got it when
I discovered on YouTube
when I zipped it up.
Yeah.
Is there a way I
Like,
on the
see the master eye roller?
put all that into it? I roll my eyes and don't realize.
Yeah.
Really? Yes.
So I think,
can't hide my
is there
expression.
anything in there that we don't want to go
This girl
into
is like
the
this
folder?
ass
I don't think so. Oh,
You know?
I mean, we can just keep that, and we can move back after.
I've
So
done
you
it.
do,
I have done it,
let's see,
but I'm not like.
I think you do MP,
Like,
space, star, space, chat room dash R.
I think my sister has snapped me. My older sister.
Yes.
In that screen.
Put a slash at the end of that.
Snapped it out of me.
Okay, you have to make that directory first. Okay, add a K here.
Okay, so all that, so we're.
Yes.
Oh, then you're kicking the-
Oh, because we made it inside. So we're trying
It's
to.
like
make
something
the whole directory
somewhere.
inside Chatter RM, the Chatter RM is also-
Maybe there's three.
So you have LS? Yes.
Okay.
So everything should be.
Whenever my mom was
It's just saying, we weren't able to zero, successfully move back, everything else should be in there.
I'm gonna shut up now, walk away and do it. Cause you're not responding to me,
Right.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna go.
Well, everything's working.
Yes.
But there's one. She don't get it.
Okay. I think we can get moving here. So the first thing that's immediately still kind of incomplete or broken is if we go to cd chat room ORM and we run node server.js, we get this big error. We see servers running, and then we get connect econ refused, sequelize error. Now this is because we don't have a database running on this cloud server. So it tries to connect to the port where Postgres is normally running, and it's on the local host because we were testing this on our local machine before, and it can't find it. So what we could do in this case is we could install Postgres here or install Docker and put Postgres in a Docker like we did locally, and we could, have it run all on this one Linux server, and that would work. It would be fine. It would be able to connect to it. The reason we're not going to do that is just because this is supposed to sort of be more of like a real production setup. And in a real production setup, you'd want your database to run on a dedicated server, which does nothing but runs the database. And in fact, because we have all this Amazon credits and stuff, we can rent a managed database from them, which requires very little setup. It's not as like flexible as a general purpose server where we can put anything, including a database, but it's very low maintenance. It should just start and run. We don't have to manage we don't even have to manage like patches, upgrades. They can do that for us. They'll do backups. And in general, they'll try to recover it automatically if something crashes on the database. So it sort of covers a whole lot of, the headaches that would come with potentially running a database here. Not to mention that often you want your application servers, your EC2s, to sort of be disposable in a sense. You want to be able to just start up a new one and provision, put everything you need onto it, and then run your application. And it doesn't have to remember anything. It doesn't have to remember any data. If it gets corrupted or broken somehow, you could just throw out this EC2 and get a new one. Now, it would be a little bit of a setup right now because we'd have to install Node again, we'd have to copy the files again. And there are easier ways to make that kind of reset up much easier. So we could say, give me 5 new servers, just like that, and get 5 new ones. With the database, you don't want it to be disposable. It's your data. You want it to be permanent. It sort of has to be managed specially. So that's another reason to put it somewhere else. So what we're going to try to do now is actually rent a Postgres server that this can connect to. And it won't be on localhost. It'll be on some other local IP address within sort of the same Amazon cloud, but not on the same server.
I got servers running, but I didn't get the errors.
Can you Control C? Can you cat server.js? And then pipe to grep -e sequelize. So it's got sequelize. Hit up, and instead of grep e sequelize, try grep, no, down. Try grep e 5432. Huh. I wonder what version of this file you have, because if I do that, cat server grep -e 5432, I don't see it either. Oh, it's the default port. What about
Did I forget the port?
maybe?
But why would that have something?
Is it the default?
The 5432?
Yeah, like our configuration. Oh,
That's.
we had this db config file, right? Yeah. So we need to do cat config.json. And see, this has Postgres CIC Postgres 127.0.0.1. The port is the default. Yeah. So can you do cat /config not /config.json, and you can do /c.
/config, yeah, .json.
Just nope. There's a config and then
No,
another.
yes.
Yeah. Just do C and tab, no dot. Just backspace. Backspace twice. C and then tab. Try see what that prints out. And scroll up a little bit. A little more. Huh. That's strange. We'll have to look into why that's not erroring. That should be erroring. Is everybody else seeing an error if they try to run it? Okay. Whoops. Yeah, that's strange. Did you somehow install Postgres on your Amazon box? Maybe.
In a hypnotic state.
Yeah.
Not that I recall.
Okay. All right, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Anyway, it should be erroring because it's trying to connect to Postgres and there's a server on localhost does not exist. So we're going to go back to Amazon land in Chrome. And I'm back on my EC2 console here. I can see the server. We're going to go to services. We're going to use a new service called RDS. And it says Managed Relational Database Service. You can just type in the box at the top. which will filter it. So this basically gives you just out of the box Postgres or MySQL or any kind of database you want to connect to. We're going to connect to Postgres, or our server expects Postgres, so we'll make a Postgres server. If we do create database, big orange button at the top, it's going to start sort of a wizard here.
Cool.
Yes, so you can just choose Postgres as one of the options. There's also MySQL, MariaDB, which is sort of a newer sort of faction of MySQL. It's very similar. Aurora is like Amazon's sort of branded managed version of either MySQL or Postgres. You can make basically a database that's compatible with either one. And it's actually very nice because they'll sort of transparently handle scaling it out and sharding it out, I believe. So it's a very sort of significant offering. And then of course, Oracle's evil database. And no, they're a very, very, very capable database that they charge a whole lot of money for normally. And I don't know if these are free tier, but you definitely pay the rental fees to Oracle too. And Microsoft's, which is also not technically free, but it's cheaper than Oracle's for sure.
Yeah, they have like a community edition. If you really
Yeah.
want to play SQL Server, you can download their community edition and use that.
Anyway, we're going to stick with Postgres. They're all, there's reasoning for doing all of them. And, I obviously have opinions, but none of them are like bad. None of them are like shoddy at being databases. They're all pretty capable databases. Okay. Ooh, global database. So they're really trying to sell this Aurora with a lot of features. This probably means they put different versions in different regions and all kinds of magic stuff. And they charge you double for it approximately, I think. But, it's arguable that it's worth it. And we'll say only enable options all the way at the bottom for the free usage tier. And of course, it grays out the magic one. But look, you can do Oracle on the free tier.
The only free thing you order it.
Yeah.
That's Larry Ellison, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of a dick.
That's the story. He has a
Not that I know him personally.
he has a sailing racing team. Anyway,
It's good to be rich.
we pick Postgres, we go to next. License model, it's the Postgres license, great. The version, you can try to go right to 11.4. I'm gonna go for it. It shouldn't matter in anything you're doing, but there's some cool new features and I wanna be able to mess with them. So the instance class is micro, and that's the only one that is eligible for the free tier. So you're gonna want to leave that. And you can check this box to be very sure, and it will automatically disable, create replicas, special kinds of storage, which are faster. You can make this smaller, but not bigger than 20. And you can storage auto scaling. I'm gonna disable that because that's gonna start charging me money. I don't want that to happen. Okay. And then you give it a name. I'm gonna call it CIC-project-database. All right. Then you need to pick a username and password. This is pretty, important to, make it a secret password. If ever, this is where I would probably talk about password managers and things that generate passwords. I have a thing called 1Password where I keep all my various logins for things, they all have their own password. They're all long, random passwords, which I don't know any of them, but they're kept by this one program. And it will also generate really good passwords for you. Think about a password if it's long and if it's actually random, like random characters, not just what you think is random, then it's pretty difficult or impossible for anyone to guess it. And that means even if they steal the database from some server, some service, and they've properly hashed all of their passwords, they're not going to be able to find your password or guess your password. And anyway, you want your passwords to be long and random when they're very important, kind of like this one. This database is not really even going to be accessible from the internet. It's only going to be accessible from our server. So it's not so much of a problem if you don't have a good password in this case, but it's good to just have as many sort of like barriers to somebody hacking your data as possible. So it is a good place to generate a password, a good password here. I recommend, again, a password manager. There's LastPass, there's 1Password. I don't know, are there free, is it good for you on KeyPass?
KeyPass is okay. It's a little bit difficult. It doesn't have like built-in browser integration, so you kind of, it just sits on your desktop or your phone, and you have to like manage the library yourself. I think LastPass is probably the one of the best for you here at the moment.
Okay,
What was it last?
LastPass.
let's post that in student resources.
There's a Remember.
I haven't used that one.
Remember,
Yeah, remember. I like the name.
name. Yeah, and LastPass is a good web app. They're compatible with every operating system. Oh, Karen's husband got in a car
Yeah.
accident?
Who did?
Karen's husband.
Oh, no.
Car accident looks like, but he's okay. But she had to go help, yeah. All right. Okay, so yeah, that is LastPass. You probably can find it. You can install that and use that for your passwords. What I'm gonna do, because it's okay, like this is not gonna be internet accessible, I'm okay just showing, I'll copy the password right here on the screen on the stream and everything. But generally you wouldn't wanna do this if, live stream your password to a bunch of people. It's a very silly idea. What you haven't seen on the screen though is the private key at any time of my own Amazon server. So anyone watching YouTube, they're not going to be able to steal my server, take it over, and use that to take over the database, because I don't believe I've shown the private key that I'm using at any time. Very cool.
So that's it? Because it's telling me to click on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you installed it. Now,
Okay,
it should,
found that.
once you go to that, it should allow you to generate a password. And that's what I would use for this, is generate and then save a password. Definitely be sure to save the password. And at least before you put a lot of important data into your database, because you will probably have to delete it and start over if you lose that password. What I'm gonna do is go to the Gibson Research Corporation Perfect Password Generator. This is a pretty cool little page. It's been around a while. And they basically use a computer with a good random number generator to generate a whole bunch of random characters. And there's like all this stuff that says, if you trust them, this is a pretty safe way to generate passwords. Like, it's not a good idea to just say random website, give me a password, and trust that they didn't use it. They've been around a while, and they have all this stuff about it only is displayed over a secure connection, HTTPS. It's marked as expired, so it won't be cached, and so forth. It's a pretty good, if you don't have any other alternative, place to get some randomly, truly random, and not known to the world digits. So I'm just gonna copy a bunch of these. I'm gonna save it in Sublime Text as my password. Super important database password. And I do not encourage you to be as careless as I'm being right now. Okay, so I've generated a nice random password. Now I could have made it the password, so I'm not being that careless, but I'm gonna say the username will be root or CIC. I'm gonna say root. And then the password is my random password. Oh, and all the browsers always suggest passwords now. They all kind of have it built in. So if like Chrome will say, oh, use this password we just generated for you, and it will save it for you probably. I don't really trust this kind of stuff because I just never use it. So I'm like, I don't even know what happens when you do this, but it totally says it will save it. And I think it'll work as long as you're logged into your Google account, something like that. Anyway, that's another good option is just use the built-in browser one. That's pretty cool that they're starting to, it's being just a standard feature now, you know?
Yeah, it's nice.
It's not good for companies like 1Password or LastPass, but
Yeah, it's good for like if you it's going from no password manager
to
to
something,
something.
yeah,
It's better.
yeah. All right, so that's it. That's all we need. I'm gonna say next. Now there's advanced settings. Now, when we created our EC2, it was in what's called a virtual private cloud. So this is like, it's sort of like a local network. So you know how you have a router at home and there's a firewall between that and the internet, and you have your computer and your PlayStation or whatever else on your home network. They're all on a local network. This is sort of like a virtual local network, which is firewalled off from the rest of the internet. And our EC2, we opened up the ability on our security group. We're opening ports and saying this port from the internet, anybody can connect into this security group. But we don't have to do that. So what we can do is be sure to put this in the default VPC. If you see more than one in this list, then let me know, I guess, because you should only have the one. We didn't create any new ones yet. And the subnet group, I believe, is that we still didn't make any of those either. You can do all kinds of crazy networking things with Amazon. We're going to leave that alone. Public accessibility, we're going to say no. So what that means is that the database will not have a public IP address assigned, and no instance or devices outside of this default VPC will be able to connect at all. And that's actually what we want, because then we're not only relying on the password of this database staying secret, we're basically saying only computers in our cloud are able to connect to it. So it's an extra way to keep it more secure. Availability zone, you'll probably see 1A, 1B, 1C in here. I'm in a different zone or whatever. I'm gonna leave it as no preference. And then create new VPC security group is what we want, because we're going to want to customize the access to this database and say only stuff in the security group we created for our application are going to be able to connect to this at all. And that will keep it pretty darn locked down and pretty darn hard to hack. The only way to hack this database really is going to be to first hack the application server and then use that to hack the database. Okay, so database name, I'll call this chat room, or this is like the default database name. You can make as many databases as you want really on this one database server. So I'll call this chat room because why not? The port, we'll leave that as the default 5432. The parameter group, yeah, whatever. I don't know what that is. It's a bunch of settings for the database, probably like, you know,
There's only one.
yeah, how long to cache, how much cache to use or whatever. And then, oh, you can actually use IAM DB authentication, which is some kind of fancy way to say you can tell the EC2 and manage all the credentials of what can connect to what in Amazon land, rather than what we're going to do, which is give the server the same password that we gave the database. We don't need to do that now, but that's worth considering in any cloud kind of service. If you're using a vendor, they usually provide tools to manage all your users, all your access, and they're very meticulous with, at least keeping them somewhat secure. So it's one way to sort of minimize the complexity of your access control. And when it's less complex, you're less likely to make a mistake with it. Really, that's the reason to consider something like that. But we're just going to use normal passwords and everything. Backup, so you get some backups. We're going to retain our backups for 7 days. So as long as you notice something is totally wrong within 7 days, you can always just jump back at least 7 days in time, effectively, to an earlier version of the database. Backup window, no preference. You can say, I want to back it up on the weekend, or I want to back it up, at a certain time. I'm going to say again, no preference. And copy tags to snapshots. Okay, yes, whatever. Enable enhanced monitoring. As long as it doesn't cost any more money.
Maybe disable to be safe.
I'm going to disable it. Performance insights. This all sounds suspiciously expensive. I'm going to disable these. You can publish logs. That will also, these logs are on the free tier too. It'll use some of them. Maybe it would be good to have the log, but I'm not going to do it right now. I think you can enable this later. Mm-hmm. This one we probably want, because then minor versions of Postgres, including like security patches or things, might they'll upgrade your database. They'll take it down for a little while, but it'll only be 5-10 minutes or so usually. And again, you can set when you want to give them the option to do that, so that well, it's only going to happen on Sundays or on, whatever. Enable deletion protection. You have to turn this off before you can delete the database, because generally people are like, the database has a lot of important stuff in it. You don't want to accidentally delete it. So that's everything. We're going to say create database at the bottom. And we probably should have taken the break now, because I'll bet it will take 5 minutes or so to actually start this database. So it's creating.
Oh, there it is.
Wait, I thought I picked Postgres 11. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so see there's VPCs. Oh, I didn't rename the security group. It's called RDS Launch Wizard. I don't know if that was even possible. But I'm going to go right to this security group once I'm on the, so say view DB instance details, the orange button, if you don't see this page yet. And it'll probably say creating for a little while it's sort of setting it up.
I got 11.
What? Oh, nice. You're lucky. It's not,
I'm a
it's just-
Postgres whisperer now.
yeah. Okay, so if you scroll down to this details, there's security and network, there's security groups, and there's this new security group that was just created. I'm going to click on this, which opens a new tab, and it brings you to the settings for this RDS, this thing the security group we just put our database in. And if we go to inbound, the source is 3877. What is this?
It must be Amazon's internal.
Maybe. Okay, so I'm gonna edit inbound. I'm gonna leave this alone, even though that looks super weird. Like, why don't they explain what that is? Anyway, that could be something Amazon, it started with this, so maybe it's necessary. I'm gonna add this rule. And we'll call this, well, it's a custom TCP rule. We're gonna say port 5432. And here, see, you can, it says you can put an IP address, but you can also put another security group. So we want to be able to say, oh, the security group that our project node server is running, that server is running its own security group. We want to be able to say that security group can connect to port 5432 here. So we're going to say, I put SG in here, and then you immediately get a list. And if you name this nicely, you can see CIC project server, that's the security group that I'm running. So we select that, and we'll say access for Node.js app server.
What did you, this is what I,
Yeah, so you, what's get room
That was
service
my-
now? Okay.
that's my blob, I don't even know. That's room service is the name.
Right, okay, so this is what you named your application,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so that's the one. If
Gotcha.
your EC2,
Oh, I see.
whatever
Okay.
you assign to your other, yeah,
Okay, it doesn't show up that way, that's why I
okay.
got confused.
Okay, so and I said access for Node.js server. I'm gonna put question marks in this one because I don't know what it is. But I'm not gonna, I'm gonna leave it alone for now because it showed up immediately. It's probably not a hack. And save. Oh, you're not allowed to make a bunch of question marks as the description. What
Such a
is
rabble
this?
rouser.
Probably no commas either. Is it Amazon? Who knows? Okay. The specified, what? Oh, I must have clicked it twice or who knows? But in any case, once that window closes, you should be able to, see in this list that there is an entry saying CIC project server or whatever you called your other security group is the source, and it can connect on port 5432. Once we do this, then we should be able to take our from our Ubuntu, we should be able to connect now. But the last thing we need is the username and password we set up to log into the database. And we also need the host of the database. We need to know where to tell it to go. We've given it access. Now we need to know where the database actually is and give it the password. So I'm going to go to RDS here. And it should eventually, endpoint not yet available in this connect section, port not yet available because it's still creating. Maybe if I reload, it'll be done creating. I feel like the internet's being used a lot here because it's going fairly slow. Okay, it says backing up. Yay, here's the endpoint. Okay, so this here is now the host. Rather than localhost or 127.0.0.1, we can put this in. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to go back to my terminal and do nano dash. Ooh, anyone else is typing choppy? This internet's going awfully slow. You just typed the whole word.
Probably the rest of you since you're trying to screen share, isn't it?
Maybe, yeah. Okay, nano./config/config.json. And if you hit tab at the end of that and it just gives you a little space at the end, then you know the file, you got the right file. I'm gonna hit enter. Now we have development. And I'm gonna keep it in development for now rather than mess with the node settings. Maybe we'll do that next time, but it's already after 8, man. And I'm gonna say, instead of username Postgres, this is going to be, username was, what was the username? Root. I think I called my username root. It would be good to write that down too. Root.
You called, wait a minute, what is this? The name of your,
The name of the username that you put into that form.
okay.
And
I
then
forgot it already.
and then the password goes in here. Now I'm pasting this right into the server. And again, I'm also streaming it on the internet. It's not, again, nobody should be able to connect to this because it's in this special security group, in this special private cloud. Generally not a good idea to do that. It's not a good idea to put this in the actual source code that's on GitHub. So it wouldn't be good to take this and just say, oh, for convenience, let me just paste it into this config file locally and then check it into GitHub. That's not a good idea either. So when we deploy, you're either gonna have to paste this in every time, or this is what we would set up a CI to automatically do for us. One of the things when you deploy would be to set these credentials. The other thing we can do is use environment variables on the server itself. So we only have to set them once for each box and load them in. Maybe we'll do that before the end of the day today, as long as we get this all working. I just want to make sure we get this working first.
Okay, so the username that we're putting in is not the same as the DB instance. It's the master username.
Yes, the master, it says it's called master username in the form. And then database is whatever you called your first database. I called it chat room. And the host is not this, it is what you have to copy from here. But the dialect is the same. Dialect is still Postgres. So we have the username, the password, the database, and the host and the dialect. Okay, so I'm gonna do Control X. It says save modified buffer. I'm gonna say Y for yes. And file name to write, that is the same file. Good, hit enter. And you've written the config out. Now here is really the moment of truth where we try to run this and see if it connects, and I haven't forgotten anything. We're going to do node server.js. Oh no, it broke. Okay, cannot read property replace of undefined. Is there a bug in, or is this a node 8, version 8 problem?
It could be.
Should we just get servers running?
Well, you were getting that before, so I'm kind of suspicious. But why is this? Oh, geez. Postgres query generator. I'm gonna, let's take a look at the source code here. That's a fun one. It's not an error in our code, it's an error somewhere in sequelize libutils.
You could try and nuking the modules.
Oh yeah, okay, let's do this. Maybe we installed the wrong node module. That's because we have node 8 running on here, and locally I had 10 or 12 or something. So I'm gonna say, I did Control C to quit that. I'm gonna do rm-rf or space -rf, and then be very careful about what you tell it to delete. And I'm gonna say node and hit tab, and it will remove the node modules folder. This will take a little while. No, it won't because it's Linux, I guess. It's not that big or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fast.
It's not that big. Okay. Maybe ext4 is really good at deleting lots of little files. Okay. Anyway, now we do npm install again, which will rebuild the node modules folder.
Yeah, I think we just didn't have a lot of packages installed.
Yeah. Well, it's taken a while to install.
I don't think npm this far back is well optimized.
Mhm. Yeah, this was when Yarn started eating their lunch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try one more time. Same error. That's really fun. Where is it? Internet to the rescue. Oh, is it because of the migrations?
Instead of having multiple references, they have one. Instead of making references and key, they've had this done both of the same objects.
I thought we already. Well, of course, their auto-generated models would not be. Okay, message. I have model and key. Well, is it not that hard to install NVM or?
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, so what we can run that node source script. And that will update our,
Oh,
it'll update what repo that Node.js package points to, so we can get the node source.
where do you get
10.
that script?
Just search node source 10.
Like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Should be right in the top there. Or sorry, top of the table of contents.
nope. Cool.
Mhm.
Okay, so you curl something, you download something from the internet, and then you run it. You just trust that it's
Yeah.
the owner of this website and HTTPS. Trust that they have not been hacked because you're going to run whatever they give you on your server. So here's what I did to upgrade Node, I suppose. Curl pipe bash. Node dash version. Still 8. Oh, I didn't do the second command? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Try reading something. No, we already read something. Okay, this wouldn't work the first time.
That's disappointing.
It's disappointing. I'm disappointed.
Yeah. So what did we break before in this thing? Wonder if it was the migrations or, you know.
I don't understand though. I'm doing my stuff on your files, right? I'm doing the same thing you are.
Yeah,
So why would mine say it's working and yours say it's not?
I'm not sure why it
Oh,
would do that.
I mean, so you could try and open up that IP address in a web browser and see what comes up.
Let's see what happens.
Okay. I'm gonna try MV migrations backup and see if it does anything different when it doesn't see any migrations. Nope. I wonder, did they break our demo like in the last 2 weeks?
So is it just the number I need to put in?
Yeah, you can say the IP address and then the port. It's also, I don't
Oh,
remember.
Port 5432.
No, so that's a Postgres port. You want to use the port that the server is running on. What's the
It
top
just
one?
said servers running. See?
Um,
Remove text.
okay, so it stopped running, so you got to start it again.
Stop.
And then copy that IP address and throw the port in front of it, at the end of it, it comes up.
Okay. That'll just node server.js.
Yeah. I think that's made it right before, right? To get running.
Ah,
So it is, it's running
Okay,
again.
so now if you go to like a web browser, you can find either just type in that IP address that you used to SSH into the server.
Where's the port?
So the port is what's defined in your server.js file.
so I think I figured out, or I have a theory. I have a
Okay.
theory. Does everyone want to hear the theory? We only have 15 minutes for this theory to pan out. But so
High stakes.
this models folder, this is the new thing we set up with all of our migrations. And the index in this models folder is basically importing everything else that's in the models folder. And it's just looping through for each file. So it's like looking, read directory sync, read all the files, look for files that end in JS, and then loop through those and import them one at a time. I believe this is going to loop through the files in alphabetical order, but message depends on user, right? Message actually has a foreign key that references this model called user. And if what it's trying to do probably is create the table with the foreign key to user, or somehow internally it's like this, there's no such thing as user yet because it has not alphabetically gotten there yet. So here is a fun hack that I'm going to try live. We're going to do nano models slash, oh, sorry, dot slash, it's not really necessary, but nano dot slash models slash index. And I'm going to scroll all the way down to here. And in between these two lines, I'm going to say dot reverse. And if this works, it's pretty hilarious. Okay, let's try it one more time. No, it didn't work. Okay. Remove ticks. Oh, geez. Yep, we might have to just give up and I'll post the answer in the channel once I find it. Have a fun night. Yeah, I might have to go digging through the git commit log and like try the older version before we did all this migration nonsense. Or we could actually just try running the migrations. That's, I think, the last thing we might as well try. And that will be MV. Okay. And I believe, what is it, sequelize? npx db migrate. Well, yeah, I think I don't want to put people through a whole bunch of, because there's something wrong here.
You know which version of Postgres you're using?
Okay, yeah. There will be the resolution to this in Slack and or tomorrow. I think maybe we have to give up because this is going to be,
Yeah.
It's 8:20. We're ending early. It's a failure and a disappointment. And
What's that?
yeah, this is where I have to say, there's still totally a reason to do all of that nonsense we just did today. Because in theory, it does work. Yeah.
It'll be really nice when it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so.
Bye. Have a good night.
This is the stuff I've been working on what Max is doing.
Sure.
So, but whenever I try to
Have a good night.
close it and then just download Gus's.
Mhm.
I get the whole back.
Yeah.
Because it was that
All right. Have a good night.
Right.
Stand
So
by
how
for
do why can't I just
the
get Gus's?
answer to the cliffhanger later. Goodbye.
How would I pull from GitHub for just Gus's?
So you can't really pull